Well, the hits never seem to stop coming. Let's take a look again at what turned out to be quite an interesting opening salvo at the last Village of Indiantown meeting. And I have to tell you, the lack of consistency of principle in all of this with them is just mind-boggling. When you observe people like Anthony Dowling and Janet Hernandez drone on about the virtue of their effort, especially when you hear the tone taken to address criticisms and media reporting about them. Not just TAM, but several other media outlets that have seen the same warning signs and flashing red lights that we have here at TAM. You can hear their own words in the Village website. We're not making it up. They say it. We just talk about it. Their ideas, their words, their actions. But before we get there, we want to tell you about another story we're working on at TAM. It seems that a certain property in town that's rumored to be developed in the near future has Indian burial mounds on it. Yeah, that's right. Tam's spoken with two lifelong members of the Indiantown community who say that they witnessed the burial of an Indian woman on the property in the near past. We'll be bringing you more about that as we tighten up the facts surrounding the matter. Stand by, more to come. Now, before everyone starts blasting us again for having these discussions, know that we're reporting on the actions and the words of the people you elected to try and run this clown show called The Village. It's their words, their votes. We report, you decide. According to Anthony and a council cheerleader at their last regular IVC meeting, it seems Facebook and social media are all of a sudden not the place to go to get information. Even though each of the two prior mentioned council people, Janet and Anthony, rely on it to put their agenda and disinformation forward. Never mind, though 60% of Americans now turn to Facebook for their news. It's somehow wrong to look for it there, according to your vocal Howard Brown fans and supporters. One of which is certainly not Susan Gibbs Thomas, who gave Howard a failing grade on his last review. Here's a link to her comments on the Casey Ingram show as to how she came to that grade. Then there is the progressive cheerleading squad that is as equally against the principled handling of the people's business. The ends to them justify the means, and when it's in violation of real and sacred terms of constitutional governance, it's unacceptable. The best they could do at the last meeting was to quote a black Muslim Marxist radical supremacist known as Malcolm X in defense of Howard and the failure of accountability on the council's part. Really? What do you mean by that? Well, let's start here. There were almost 50 minutes of defense of Howard Brown at the last meeting, including some pretty anti-Chamber of Commerce comments made as well. I guess the fact that the village wants to hire another staffer to deal with economic development would have nothing to do with that, though. I mean, really, why would you want a chamber of stakeholders, employers, tax-paying businesses, and business people to have anything to do with commerce? Personal kingdom building, maybe? So let's start with Anthony's brown-nosed fluff about Howard's 25 years of achievement with an association called the ICMA, where the I stands for international, not American or Floridian, nope, international standards and practices in local government. Oh wait, it gets better. The association is full of United Nations Agenda 2030, Agenda 21 Great Reset roadmaps. It's full of the current toxic cancel culture diatribes of social equity and social justice, along the same progressive lines as Ilhan Omar, Rashid Tlaib, and Alexandria Occasional Cortex. It sets agendas and roadmaps, their own words, to inject this toxic mentality into your government and governance. Still want to go along to get along? Like renaming Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day, remember? And the last-minute proclamation of social equity and justice that was slipped in not too far back. In their own words, the ICMA works for inclusion of these anti-American socialist progressive policies in local government. In local government. In short, it's a progressive, far left-leaning collection of lifelong bureaucrats that make their living off the blood and money of the American taxpayer at the expense of constitutional governance. The same people that did not see a need for guidelines or policies from the council instructing them on how to take action and what direction to do it in. Unless, of course, those policies are set with a wink and a nod in a closed-door agenda development meeting, instead of in the light of day. Maybe Janet doesn't have enough wisdom to operate as an independent, free-thinking woman, and that's why she uses Howard as a crutch to base all of her decisions on. Original thought and critical thinking seem to be too much to ask. She even admits to that in her own statements from the dais. Of course, though, as Anthony said, I haven't worked this hard in my life. No kidding, Anthony. You really haven't had a job and you still don't. You continue to take from the taxpayer for your existence. Maybe if you stop dragging the people along, too, you might find it less work. Shame on both of you. The self-important attitude the children on this council have taken are rubbing many county stakeholders and other elected officials in a negative light. Indiantown is a laughing stock right now, and some higher-ups we've spoken with have written several of the council off as ineffective, self-absorbed egomaniacs that are driving the progressive short bus to the edge of the cliff for a big wreck. Can you say fire rescue? The appearance is that showmanship and not substance is winning the day for those with higher political aspirations. They seem to be taking a lot of their cheerleaders with them to the edge as well. Then we have the not so well thought out defense of Howard Brown used by the current village mouthpiece and mayor, Janet Hernandez. Whew, where do we start? Even in her own words, she says, "We have no idea and need to rely on the knowledge of Howard because we don't have the knowledge to make the decisions otherwise." Okay, at least you're honest and admit that you really don't know much of anything, I guess. I get that, but to treat this leftist, Howard Brown, that's financially and socially raping the village for personal gain, like he walks on water, well, that's ridiculous. That is, unless you agree with the identity politics of the groups that Howard has heralded for being such a big part of. He's using these ideas and ideologies and integrating toxic racial identity politics and un-American ideas into your village government. It needs to end. It's fine, I suppose, if you're uneducated and lack the knowledge required to drive this runaway freight train. If you're in support of council members that proclaim their leftist progressive socialist agendas by aligning with the YEO network and other radical far left associations like the ICMA, then you too are part of the problem. It strikes me as laughable to watch the self-important venom that runs from the mouths of Anthony and Janet and sometimes Jackie when they decide that Howard and staff have all the answers. Fine. If you want to hand the future off to the unelected, then you have to live with that. You can continue to pretend that you're doing anything except sitting there in front of the microphone and vote how you are told. You're violating your oath. You should and will one day be held accountable in time. So, as an unknown public speaker that claims to have been another far-left elected mayor from the Northeast said at the last council meeting, consider the source. I could not agree more. Consider the source as being the radical far-left identity politic, race-baiting, tax and spend equity and social justice baboons from the Dark Ages. You know the same ones that say critical race theory is good for America? The same progressive children that are drunk with ego-driven power that will tell you racism is systemic and because you're white, you're a racist? The same crowd that advocated for policy to penalize anyone that does not adhere to their view of how things should be? So much for unity, inclusion, and representing all of Indiantown. The same crew that wanted to add tens of thousands of dollars to the cost of a new home because they said it was the responsible thing to do. No, the emperor has no clothes. Watching this social train wreck that is the village of Indiantown is sad and exciting at the same time. Hopefully, the people of Indiantown will realize who is and who is not representing their interests before the next election. Maybe, too, when they approve some of those high-price zero lot line and stack and pack housing units, we can get a fresh batch of voters in here to correct the problem that is the village of Indiantown. Problem's the approach being taken, lack of accountability exhibited by Howard Brown and his crony grunts on the council and staff. As we've said many times before, engage. You have to listen, think, and act. If you see something that looks wrong, engage. The time to take your stand and get involved is before the problems manifest in your village. Get rid of the cancer that's killing Indiantown. It's your heritage and no one will protect it if you don't care to either. Engage. There's a bill to be paid for all of these actions, and that check is going to start coming due very soon. Stand by.